We all know the name Moses, right? But what about the story behind the story? How does a prince of Egypt, a fugitive, wanted for murder no less, become one of the most powerful prophets of God? Well, today we're diving into that exact transformation. It's an incredible journey from a royal palace, deep into the wilderness, and straight into a divine destiny he never saw coming.
So what does turn a fugitive into a prophet? I mean, that's the big question here, isn't it? How does a guy with a price on his head, literally on the run for his life, end up as God's chosen messenger? It's a heck of a career change. And the answer actually starts long before he ever fled Egypt. It starts right back in the palace he grew up in.
All right, so let's set the scene. Our story kicks off with this huge fundamental conflict. Moses is born a Hebrew slave. His destiny? A life of hard labor, just like the rest of his people. But then, fate intervenes in this really dramatic way. He ends up being raised as a prince in the very Egyptian court that's enslaving his own family and friends. Can you even imagine the pressure on this guy? For 40 years, he's living this complete double life. On one hand, he's got all the privilege in the world. He's educated in the sophistry and intrigue of the court. He knows how to play the game. But on the other hand, every single day, he knows his true heritage. He sees his people suffering under the rule of his own adopted family. That kind of conflict, yeah, it's a ticking time bomb. It just can't stay buried.
And sure enough, that bomb eventually goes off. The internal conflict just explodes into action. The source material we're looking at talks about this spirit of indignation and rebellion just boiling up inside him. And the breaking point? It's when he sees an Egyptian taskmaster just brutally beating a fellow Hebrew. That was it. He couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. He had to do something.
And when the struggle was over, the Egyptian was dead. Just like that, in one single, violent moment, his entire life as a prince is completely shattered. When Pharaoh finds out, he orders Moses to be slain. He has no choice. He has to run. He flees into the desert, now a fugitive from the only home he'd ever known. So Moses escapes across the Red Sea and finds his way to the land of Midian. And you've got to think, he probably figured he was just escaping his past, right? Just trying to survive. But this quiet, solitary desert, it was about to become the very crucible that would burn away his old identity and forge a completely new one. And look at this comparison. It's just night and day. He goes from being a prince to a shepherd, from power and palaces to peace and pastures. All that political intrigue he grew up with, gone, replaced by the simple life of a shepherd, by priesthood and by family. He marries Zipporah, the daughter of the high priest Jethro, and just manages his father-in-law's flocks. He becomes a totally different person.
This timeline really lays it all out, doesn't it? 40 years as a prince, then he flees, and then another 40 years as a shepherd in Midian. Think about that. 40 years. That's a huge chunk of a person's life. It might look like he was just laying low, that this was a forgotten chapter. But in reality, this was a long, slow period of profound preparation for the incredible calling that was just around the corner.
So, Moses is now pushing 80 years old. It's been 4 decades of this quiet, peaceful existence. And then, on what seemed like just another routine day herding sheep near Mount Horeb, everything changes. This ordinary day becomes the single most important encounter of his life. He sees something bizarre. A bush that's on fire, but it's not being consumed. It's just burning. The leaves aren't charring, the branches aren't turning to ash. It's a total paradox. Naturally, he's curious, right? So he gets a little closer to check it out, and that's when a voice speaks to him right from the middle of the flames.
And here, on this holy ground, Moses gets his divine calling. God tells him, "Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground." And that's not just about footwear, it's symbolic. He has to shed his old self. God had chosen him, not the powerful prince from Egypt, but the humble, 80-year-old shepherd, the fugitive, to go back and rescue the children of Israel.
Now this came as a tremendous shock to Moses. I mean, his first reaction isn't, okay, let's do this. It's fear. He offers up a whole bunch of excuses. And honestly, can you blame him? He's a wanted man in Egypt, and he's being told to go right back there. He felt completely unprepared for the job, but he was about to find out that with God on his side, he couldn't fail. But that burning bush, that was just the start. That was the call. Before he could actually lead Israel, Moses needed to be tutored. He needed a prophet's education, and his teacher was going to be the Lord himself.
So how do we know about this? Well, there's a scripture called the Book of Moses, and it gives us this incredible, detailed look at his divine preparation. It all starts when Moses is brought up to what the scripture calls an exceedingly high mountain to have a direct conversation with God.
And we're not talking about another voice from a fire. No, this time he saw God face to face. He talked with him. And God tells him, "Behold, thou art my son, wherefore look, and I will show thee the workmanship of mine hands." In that moment, Moses learns the literal truth that man is created in God's own image. It was a complete game changer.
And then the vision just gets bigger. Moses is shown this massive panoramic view of the world, and, as it says, all the children of men which are and which were created, the entire human family, past and present. When the vision ended, the effect on him was, well, it was overwhelming. The experience left him physically drained. He literally fell to the earth. But more than that, it left him profoundly humbled. He says to himself, "Now, for this cause I know that man is nothing, which thing I never had supposed." For a guy who grew up as a prince in Egypt, that realization that man is nothing in comparison to God's glory was a total 180.
But being humbled didn't crush his spirit. In fact, it made him even more eager to learn. But before God would speak to him again, Moses had to face a pretty severe trial, a test of faith.
See, before Moses could get another revelation, he was going to be exposed to a satanical exhibition of power. God needed to show him, beyond any doubt, that there are two great forces in the universe, and it was absolutely crucial that he could tell the difference between them.
So Lucifer was actually permitted to appear. First, he tries to tempt Moses. When that doesn't work, he tries to intimidate him with this terrifying demonstration of power. And for a second, Moses starts to get scared. And in that fear, the scripture says he saw the bitterness of hell.
But right there, in that critical moment, Moses calls on God. He draws on that newfound spiritual strength from his vision, and he commands Satan, saying, "Depart from me, for this one God will I worship, which is the God of glory." He learned right then and there that God's power was supreme.
And just like that, it was over. Defeated, Satan leaves. Having passed this trial, having confronted the prince of darkness himself and won, Moses was now truly prepared. The fugitive was ready to become God's prophet.
So is greatness born in palaces, or is it forged in the wilderness? The journey of Moses seems to suggest that sometimes the road from privilege to real purpose, well, it has to go through exile. It has to go through humility. And it has to go through trials in the desert.